Life always seems to bring us new situations. Sometimes we know how to handle things, but other times, maybe more often, we might be at a loss to know exactly what to do. It's not easy to determine what to do, especially in difficult matters. To know how to balance maybe many of the different factors that we want to take into account. Would this action be appropriate at this time, at this place? Is it even lawful? Is it a moral thing for me to do? What's the best thing that I should do? Often we have to go through a process of deliberation, examining things very carefully before we can come to a proper conclusion. Well, the apostles in the first reading face really their first major decision that they have to make after Jesus ascends back to heaven. Questions had come about as to, well, how connected is the Christian faith still with the Jewish faith? Paul and Barnabas, as we heard last weekend, they had begun to preach the good news to many of the non-Jewish people that were living in Asia Minor. But since Christianity was kind of this fulfillment and kept coming out of Judaism, there were questions as to, well, how much of the Jewish practices do Christians still need to do? Did the Gentile Christians, for example, have to be circumcised? Did they have to follow all of the dietary laws and all of the Jewish rituals? What about the areas of marriage, the commandments? And so in response to these questions, the apostles all got together for the very first council of the church held in Jerusalem. So as it describes, there was a lot of debate among them. Paul and Barnabas, they give testimony as to what they experienced in sharing the good news with the Gentiles. And Peter and James, as really their highest leaders, gave important speeches. And they finally, after they came to a conclusion, decided to send out a letter that would be circulated among the many communities, giving the results. And so they decided that there were certain practices that had to be followed, like the commandments, of course, as well as proper marriage and avoiding certain pagan practices. But there were other things like circumcision and the dietary laws, which they determined were not essential parts of the Christian faith. And so the Gentile Christians weren't placed under the burden of those laws. A decision like this, and many of those kind of important decisions that we make in our lives, for our parishes, for our families, for ourselves, shouldn't simply be based upon personal opinions. There has to be a much more solid foundation if we really want to make a decision based upon what is good and what is true. And that's why the apostles explain in that letter they send how they came about to this conclusion. They write, "It is the decision of the Holy Spirit and of us." See, their decision, they recognized as, we're not founding this on our own opinions, but rather it's founded upon what is God's will. How has God guided us through the Holy Spirit? And so in our gospel today, Jesus prepares the apostles and he prepares us for this period of time that we live in now, where he's not with us physically on earth other than in the Eucharist, and we have to make a number of decisions in our lives. And he tells us that the advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you of all that I have told you. So Jesus promises to send us the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity. And he calls this Holy Spirit the advocate. The Greek word actually is Paraclete, if you've heard that Holy Spirit called that before. And really the terms are very rich. It refers to him being a comforter for us, a helper, a counselor. And so as this helper and counselor, the Holy Spirit, Jesus says, will teach us everything. So when we come across new situations in our life, things that we don't know what to do about, the Holy Spirit has been given to guide us. Jesus says that the Holy Spirit will remind us of all the things that Jesus taught us. You see, when we face new situations that we don't really know how to deal with on our own, the Holy Spirit assists us by applying the truths of God that don't change. So as much as things may change in our lives, His truths don't. They stay the same. And the Holy Spirit guides us in pointing out how to apply those truths in those specific cases. One of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit is specifically designed for applying God's eternal truths in those individual times. And that's the gift of counsel. The gift of counsel. Because Jesus points out in the gospel, again, that trying to follow Him can bring those moments where we might be troubled. We might be afraid. We might be unsure or timid in making decision and acting. Life can get kind of complicated at times. But this gift of counsel is meant to guide us along the sometimes winding and troublesome paths of life, so that we can reach our destination, life forever with God. And so this gift of counsel applies God's own reasoning, His own way of thinking, to those very specific cases that we have to deal with. So if you find that you're having trouble making a decision, if you're not sure what you're supposed to do, bring that situation to prayer. Ask the Holy Spirit for the gift of counsel. And as Jesus promises, the Holy Spirit will be sent to our aid to help you to know what to do, how to do it in the right time as well. He can help make our decisions sure and bold. Because that's what we see after the coming of the Holy Spirit with the apostles, as well as the saints throughout the history of the church. They're able to act with a security and a rapidness to follow God's will. Because they don't follow simply the counsels or the opinions of their fellow men, nor do they just follow their own reason. They have something much higher to follow. They have eternal reason. They have the very mind of God Himself that illuminates their spirit and puts before them the path, the road that they are to follow. Jesus tells us in the gospel, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you." Indeed, peaceful and happy are the souls who yield to the Holy Spirit's